Gentlemen, today on Used Motorcycle Rehab, we're going to swap out our old crap eBay regulator rectifier with a new hotness name brand Shindengen SH020AA MOSFET type regulator rectifier. Now, why are we doing this? I took the bike out and rode it a few times, just short distances, testing all the various other work that I've done. And I noticed that frequently I would come back out in the morning and try to start it up, and it wouldn't start. The battery would not be able to get the engine started. Now, you might think that when you see those symptoms, the problem is the battery, but I would subsequently charge the battery, and it would work for a while until it ran down again, and then I'd come back out in the morning again, and it still wouldn't start. So what I've concluded is it's probably the regulator rectifier, as this is a common issue on this particular bike. And from what I can tell, with the engine running, we don't get enough charging voltage at the battery to charge the battery up. You normally want to see like 14, and what we're seeing is 13.5, but with the engine off, the battery is producing 12.5 or so, which is pretty healthy. So it's my hypothesis that the problem is the regulator rectifier, which also is a cheap eBay unit and thus suspect anyway. So today we're going to replace it with a known good, real deal Shindengen SH020AA MOSFET type that's more efficient and more reliable than the stock unit. Our new rectifier regulator assembly comes in a kit with what you see here, obviously excluding our old crap one. You get the regulator rectifier itself, these two weather pack connectors, you get a length of black and red wire for hooking it up, plus some butt connectors to be used for hooking up the wires to the wiring harness, and these various other parts of our connectors that fit onto these spots on the regulator rectifier itself. This is all sold as a kit by a fellow on eBay, and there's also another fellow who sells a similar kit, and I'll provide links to them down in the description. Both of them provide a means of telling that this is in fact a genuine Shindengen unit, as opposed to some that look similar but are in fact counterfeits. Apparently the factory that makes these was destroyed in 2011 in an earthquake in Japan, and so they haven't made these in a while, and there's only a few vendors that actually have real deal ones. So the way that this is going to be done is that we crimp these terminals onto the wires that we assemble onto our connectors, and then we splice the wires that we've crimped onto there into the wiring harness for the bike. Now there's a couple of different ways that we could do that, and I think the way I may do this, contrary to what the instructions say, is to cannibalize the wiring from the old regulator, because it has these nice connectors on it that we can use to hook it directly up to the connectors on the wiring harness, and thus avoid the need to modify the bike's wiring harness, which I think is a good idea. The instructions that this comes with suggest that you should wire it directly up to the battery from the output side and splice it directly into the bike's wiring harness on the input side here. Which I'm going to do this in such a way that that's still an option, but I think I want to try preserving the connectors first, because I like the fact that it's not a part of the harness and that it can be removed for servicing if we need to. Intending to cannibalize our old wiring from our eBay regulator, it's just a matter of cutting this off. So now we've got a pigtail that we can use to crimp our new connectors onto. So we set that one aside, and this one, if you're wondering what that noise is, I live not far at all from an airport. That is an airplane. Now we've got our second pigtail here. Because it's the simplest to do, I think what we're going to do first is this input side connector. And the way we do that is we get these little weather pack condom things that are used to seal up the back side of these connectors. And we slip them over the wires and get them down on there far enough. You see we've got two more for our input side, or sorry, the output side. And there we go. So we got our three wires there. We'll go ahead and get our, you could totally just bend these until they came off, but I'm feeling fancy today. There we go. So we got our three terminals here. And we need to strip these wires, like that. We want maybe 1/4 of an inch or so. That's a little more than 1/4 of an inch. There we go. One more. There. And now, we need our friend, the crimper. And I think we may need a larger die than that. These crimpers used to be a real pain in the neck to get your hands on if you weren't a technician in a factory that assembles these connectors, but Amazon has made these crimpers so cheap that if you do this with any kind of regularity, you might as well just go ahead and buy one, because you will inevitably use it more than once. So these guys just go in here like this. And this particular crimper comes with these nifty removable dies so that it can be used with different types of terminals. And I think this one is probably about this size. That looks approximately right. And in fact, we may, you know what we're gonna do? Twist this wire. There we go. Okay, so we're going to twist the wire to get it a little neater and easier to get into the thing. So we get our terminal in the crimper. Run that down and see how it... Okay, that's on there, I guess. So we've got one terminal crimped on there. We'll go ahead and do the other ones. So get that in there, get our wire in. These actually seem like maybe they're 4s and not 6s, so we're going to cinch them down with the 4 just to be sure. I have 2 of these crimpers, and neither of them seems to be the right size to do these little ears. So I may do it the way I've always done it in the past. And simply bend these guys over with my wire stripper. And if anybody happens to know what the die looks like for these things, and where to get them, you post that in the comments, and I will love you long time. But I've been doing this since time immemorial, and I've never seen the right crimper for that. So, now that we've got our 3 terminals on there, we can stick them in the connector, but they go this way. So you got your little release tab here. I bet they go in here like this. Yeah. You should hear a little click when they make it all the way home. Where's that? There it is. You may need to stick something in from the back, like a little screwdriver, to get them seated in the connector. There we go. We got our 3 terminals in there. And we can get our weather pack thingies going. Maybe. We may need to trim some of this. Trim it with this. We need to trim some of that back a little, get the wires farther apart. Once we do, we can pack our little rubber seals into the bores, like that. And there we go. One pigtail ready to go on. And now we can move on to our other guy. Now the kit comes with much heavier gauge wire than this, but these wires are doubled up. And I think what I may try to do is use the doubled up wires from this instead of trying to splice them all together, on the grounds that I don't think this puts out enough amps to justify the hassle of doing that. Basically, if this worked for Suzuki from the factory, and they used this same design for, like, I think you can still buy an SV650 that's more or less got this same setup, it's probably good enough for our purposes. And these are relatively thick wires anyway, and there's 2 of them. So we're going to say that this is probably good enough. and give it a shot. So there we go. We've got our wires stripped, ready to get the terminals on them. I'm going to twist these together like this. And we'll get our little guy in the crimper. Stick our wires into it like this. And there we go. There's one. There we go, there's two. And like the others, I think we're gonna maybe assume that these are supposed to be 4mm, which is this middle size, and redo them a little tighter. Like that. And those are on there pretty good now. I don't think I'm worried about that falling out. So now we can crush our tabs down. So now we get our connector. And we look and see, okay, so the positive goes on this side. Let's peel some of this jacket back. Before this goes back on the bike, we will in fact trim this so that it fits more nicely. Okay, so we get our terminals the right way up. Take another look at, again, just to be sure. And if we look at our regulator, the positive side is definitely on the left as you look at it. So we'll stick our thing in there, and this guy goes in here, and there we go. And we'll push our little retainer thing down. Did we do this one? Yeah, we did this one already. Okay, so now we've got our two pigtails ready to hook the regulator back up to the bike. So we'll go ahead and trim our jacket a little bit, being careful not to nick the wiring. We'll do this one. Actually, you know what? I like the way that is. See that? It's kind of, it almost looks like it should be like that. All right, well, great. Now we can go plug these in and test if it works. With our pigtails assembled, it's just a matter of plugging them in on the regulator. And that one could stand to be an inch or two longer. Okay, but as we can see, we've got a plus here and a minus there. Maybe you can't see that. You'll have to take my word for it. Positive and negative there. So we slide that guy into place, just like that. If you look at the wire on the bike, it's much smaller than these, so I think that's probably all right. So can we make this work? Certainly isn't any too long. We may need to lengthen this. I'm not super happy with this, but maybe we can stick a section in here and no one will see it. Anyway, that's connected, so let's give it a shot and see. May need to do something about these being open. That's like right in here too. Let's make sure that this was at least an electrical solution to our problem. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is measure the battery voltage with the engine off. So if we take our leads here and put it there, we got 12.9. It's actually on the high side, but I had a charger on it for several days, so it's probably got kind of a surface charge on it. When we crank it initially, it will probably drop down to like 12.5. But that looks pretty good right there. So now we need to start the engine. Actually, first, before we do that, let's test at our terminals. Is this control? There we go. So if we test at the terminals at the regulator, we also get 12.9-ish volts, which is good. So now, let's see if we can't start the engine here. Transmission in neutral, clutch in. Alright, so with our engine running, we saw over 14 volts, which is what we want to see. So I think we're in good shape here. Now the question is, how do we get the fairing back on over this? Because it sticks much farther down this way, than the old one did. And I have a feeling that it's not going to fit this way. I wonder if we can rotate it this way. Maybe make a little bracket for it and rotate it this way. Let's try that. Actually, maybe we could just use one bolt. What if we did one bolt on it like this? Another option would be to mount this under the seat in here. I'm not super in love with that, but if we have to, that's what we could do. But let me show you what the actual problem with this is here. If we take our fairing half, we try to put it back on. See this? It connects right there in such a way as it's not going to fit. So we may have to relocate this to under the seat, which is an acceptable location. What would be really nice is if we could get it this way. It's susceptible to vibration, so ideally you want to attach it to something rigid. Wonder if we could attach it like right here. I think maybe under the seat is our best bet. I don't know how much airflow flows through there, but it's got to be at least as much as flows over this. I don't see any sort of scoop or anything on this side. So I think what we may do is drill a couple little holes in the fender and install this under the seat. I hate to, well, the wires aren't long enough for that. I hate to install this too far away from the standard location, but I tell you what though, it was nice to not have to solder this. Alright, so you can see our regulator here, and I think this is just about the best spot I'm going to find for it in this area. There is talk of relocating it to other places on the internet, but I think I don't want to do that. I want to preserve as much of the original wiring harness as I can, and I'm not super concerned about usability of this space. Other than maybe a piece of paper, I don't need to put anything in here, other than my handy little prop rod, obviously. So it looks like there's a space in here that's just right to mount this. So I need to drill a couple of holes right here, and I've got space, I think, on this end for my connectors. Seems acceptable. Maybe I can just disconnect it from over here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I need a little punch or something to score the plastic so I know where to drill my hole, and then I need a drill. Okay, right there. So we've got a spot right there. We've got one right here that you may not be able to see on camera, but I can see it. So you drill a hole there, and about right there. Looks like it'll work. Will our bolts fit? Oh yeah, good deal. I think that'll work right there. You may want to seal these from the other side. So we get our bolts in there. We've got plenty of meat on the underside to put a nut on them. Okay, so now we got our two electrical connectors up here. So we get that connected. We're going to line up our bolt holes. There. There are tons of great deals to be had on eBay, but one of the best ones is these assortments of bolts from used motorcycles that a lot of guys will they'll finish parting out a bike and they'll have like all this hardware left over. And they'll sell this for like $10, where individually any one of these bolts, and this is an awesome titanium fastener by the way. How slick is that? Maybe we'll set that one aside and show it off. These hardware assortments that you can often find on eBay are rife with all sorts of stuff that you may need at one point, like washers. I think these here will fit our bolts that we're using to hold a regulator. One more nut, perhaps is the same size? Maybe these will work. These look a lot more proper. Anyway, yeah, one of the best deals you can get on eBay is these assortments of bolts that, you know, if you bought 2 or 3 of these, say you spent $20 or $30 on them, there's easily $20 or $30 worth of trips to the hardware store in here to find like one of those annoying little blister packs of like 10 bolts when you needed one. So here we are under the fender, we've got our 2 bolts sticking out here. And we'll just go ahead and get our nuts that we found from our hardware assortment. I bet you these are from a Kawasaki. Started on our bolts. I've got 2 10mm ratchets. So we do one on the bottom and one on the top. And we tighten them until they're snug one ug. Like that. And there we go. I don't think that's going anywhere. But now we can put the fairing back together. This right here, these stupid rubber grommets, are entirely a stupid design. Like, I can't even express in words how stupid a design that is. But if I could, it would be something like, oh! So for those of you, which is all of you probably, who can't see what I'm doing there, this piece and this piece are held together with this tiny little self-tapping screw. You can sort of see one here that, like, it's aimed that way. Like, why can't they aim it this way? Bolt with a washer. Alright guys, well, as you can see, the fairing's back on. I shouted profanity at it for half an hour and it went back together all by itself. It's amazing how that works. Anyway, I think that ought to solve our problem. We're at least getting the voltage that we need while the engine is running. So we're gonna say, for the moment anyway, that the problem is solved. I'm not quite ready to go and like really ride the bike yet, so we'll just have to check on it later, but there you go. At any rate, if you need to do this, and your battery is good, and your stator is good, and you really do just need to replace that, you could follow this procedure that I just did, and you'd be successful. We'll see how that goes under the seat here. I would assume that it'll probably be alright, but I don't know for sure. If the regulator rectifier survives inside this side piece, there's a lot more air inside there, I would think, and especially with my bike doesn't have the sissy bar that's supposed to be right here, I would think that enough air would make it through there as you go down the road for it to not overheat. So we're going to call this the end of this one, and I will see you in the next one.